начинаем четвертый трек
Hello,
в
everyone.
разделе про бизнес.
Let's start the fourth track today about business. I'm Andrei Kuzin. I'm a Positive Operational Director or COO. I support our businesses within the company. My area of responsibility is business support, everything else.
Ребята там про финансы, про
I mean, I have IT guys, legal, finance guys, and so on.
И несколько слов скажу про то,
I'll say a couple of words about PH days and why we are having those business tracks. There are 4 business tracks just for all the PhD. Historically, PhD was a closed event, and at first we thought that it would be a meeting point for t-shirts and jackets. So techie guys like IT, CB, and so on and so forth, who can only talk about professional issues, and it was a closed event. Starting from the previous year, this event, responding to needs of our growing company and to the needs of people who just joined in, became an open city IT festival. Last year, we had it in the Gorky Park, and we had about 40 to 50,000 attendees, and so several thousand people offline and 40,000 people online. But last year, we actually saw that we need more space. And there were a lot of questions. Can you talk about not only CB? And we decided to have these 4 tracks. So today we have talked about financing, about transparency and corporate responsibility, and we have talked about risk management in our previous discussion. But I will first introduce my guys. Dmitry Patrikeev, he is CIO, and Oleg Chergin is responsible for data, for the processing and storage of big amounts of data in the company. So they will introduce themselves as well. The overall idea is this. We are a technological company. We're growing fast. We are always short of servers. We're always short of engineers. We need to make a decision whether we want an on-prem or cloud business. And those servers, they go out of operation in all directions. I mean, we have enough memory, but we don't have servers, or vice versa. And especially after we lost access to international technology, we started to think of what a company, which would be 5 times more than Positive today, what kind of internal infrastructure it would have. Data storage, R&D, and we have 25 different products, and they are always modified. We need to store and process a lot of data. Which solutions we need to make sure it's strategically right and operationally efficient. So we don't want to redo it once again in a year or 2. So how to make the infrastructure efficiency as high as possible. So can we make it to 90+%? And this is exactly what we're going to talk about today. Okay, Dmitry, you have the floor. Well, I'm always forgetting this. We have a QR code. I've been forgetting all day. If you follow this QR code, you can ask a question to our panelists and speakers. There is a chat bot.
Вот.
You choose the room and you write your questionnaire. Yeah, hello everyone. What I'd like to start with is a couple of 2 points. We have a business track, so we will try not to digress too far into the tech talk, but please don't get offended if we actually do. This presentation is going to be about what we at Positive think about the right construction of infrastructure, but it's not only that. It's not just thoughts. Tomorrow, there will be several technical tracks in architecture, in platforms. It's not just a concept, it's something that we have already implemented. We have real-world systems, and these systems already work. Well, we've been introduced, I think, so we'll skip over that slide.
На этот вопрос Андрей уже тоже частично ответил. Вот. В чем проблема? Проблема в том, что инфраструктура все время растет.
So what is the problem? Our problem is, if you can call it that our infrastructure has to grow all the time. In a company that develops organically, it's okay, it's quite forecastable and manageable growth. If you're growing at a pace Positive is growing, it's already difficult to imagine how much of what you're going to use and you're going to need next year. Fast-growing companies are dynamic in internal changes too. Fast-growing companies experiment a lot with a lot of business areas, and a lot of data that emerge out of those experiments need storage, processing, and actually doing something about that data. Most people, the first thing most people think about is public clouds, because a public cloud is unlimited resources. It is easy. Everything on your fingertips. And you can get ML and other new technologies which you don't normally get on-prem. It's an opportunity to check business hypotheses quickly, and in the very beginning, you don't even need special support. You can get access to the cloud to a team that develops a new service, and you just go and forget about this. So if you're flexible about your growth, you can use the cloud if you have high degree of automation. It is not a very costly thing to do. However, when you get to a point when the amount of cloud infrastructure becomes comparable to what we started with, local infrastructure, you start to feel that there are a lot of disadvantages about the cloud too. We actually lose control of what's happening, because many teams do something on their own. Costs continue to grow. And if you control your infrastructure, if you can control your infrastructure in a way that's, that's controlled by deliveries of your hardware, here you have to pay by the click, actually. Of course, the architecture, the local architecture and on-prem architecture is different from the cloud. So what you are ending up with is like parallel infrastructure. And in large companies, you can't say that it's the second infrastructure. They have one infrastructure in data centers, another on the cloud, and
ну, там, привет
The
всяким
third
большим программно-аппаратным
data
комплексам, например,
infrastructure
Oracle,
is
или,
absolutely distinct
там,
from everything
какой-нибудь,
else,
который может
like
стоять и
Oracle or
требовать вообще
Hadoop,
отдельного сопровождения,
which
отдельных людей,
may
отдельных
require
ресурсов.
specific people,
Вот.
specific resources,
Плюс
specific
ко
support,
всему,
and so
при
on.
таком использовании широком облаков мы получаем сильный vendor-lock.
Another
То
point
есть, наверняка, кто пробовал работать с
is
облаками,
that
знает, как
you
сложно
are
переехать
locked
из
to
одного
a
облака в
certain
другой,
vendor
если
when you
при этом
start
возникла
using a cloud.
необходимость.
If you want to move clouds,
Я,
everybody
когда
who's
готовил
been
этот
there
слайд,
knows that it is very difficult to do.
идея была какая? Показать, что
My idea
например, и весь
in
мир
this
тоже
slide
движется в направлении того,
was
чтобы
to
использовать
show
облака.
that
Ну, то
the
есть
whole
это
world is
неизбежно,
also
действительно,
moving
научиться
toward the
работать, а
clouds.
не
So it's
пытаться
inevitable,
избегать
and you
проблемы.
have to
Вот.
learn
И
how to work with it rather than you have to
интересно,
think
что
of ways to
вот это
avoid it.
тренды на 23 год,
And it's
которые
interesting
Гартнер
that these are
опубликовал,
trends
естественно, в
for
22.
2023. Of course,
Вот
Gartner had
тренд
published
о
that in
том, что нужно идти в
2022.
облака, он был в 2019 году. То есть,
So
условно
actually,
говоря, уже
the
5 лет
cloud
Гартнер говорит о
trend
том, что нужно туда идти,
has
нужно
been
учиться с этим
there
работать, нужно
back
это
in
использовать.
2019.
И
So for
сейчас
5
уже
years,
основные
Gartner has
тренды —
been
это
saying that
ML,
you
AI,
should go there.
платформенный инжиниринг,
And
который идет уже
the
поверх
biggest
вот этого
trends are
инфраструктурного
ML, AI, and platform engineering,
Какое
which is
решение всего
actually
этого мы
lives
видим
on
для
top of
себя
this
в
infrastructure
перспективе и к
layer.
какому решению мы пришли?
So what is our
Мы для
solution
себя
at
решили, что
Positive
мы не
about
будем
this?
выбирать между
We
облаками и
decided
on-prem.
that what we're not going to do, we're not going to
Учимся
choose
работать в
between
гибридной
cloud and on-prem.
инфраструктуре,
And we're
которая
learning to work in a
реализуется внутри
hybrid
компании как
infrastructure,
сервис. То есть, условно
which
говоря,
within the
для
company
команд
is
разработки, для тех, кто
provided as a
работает с
service.
инфраструктурой, этот слой
For
абсолютно, ну, то есть, с
developers,
одной
for people
стороны
who work
закрыт, с
with
другой полностью
infrastructure,
прозрачен. То есть ты
this
можешь
layer
развернуть
is,
одинаковые сервисы
on the one hand, very closed,
on-prem,
on the other,
одинаковые сервисы
absolutely
в любом из
transparent.
облаков, который
You can
подключен к
deploy a
с
service
которыми мы работаем. И
on-prem
поэтому
or
это
in the
дает
cloud
возможность
to which we are connected.
очень гибко управлять ресурсами,
And
дает возможность работать
it
с
makes it
апскейлом и
possible to
даунскейлом ресурсов.
upscale and
И
downscale your resources in a very
мы
flexible
считаем,
way.
что это основной путь, куда необходимо развиваться.
So we think that we are now moving in the right direction.
Вот, за счет того,
How
что
do we do
мы
that?
избегаем
In order to do that, we need
так
to
называемых
totally
второстепенных, то есть
automate
мы стараемся не использовать
everything
проприетарные
that
решения, стараемся
deals
не
with the
использовать
infrastructure.
проприетарные
We try
сервисы, в том
not to
числе и
use
SaaS и
proprietary
PaaS.
solutions, proprietary services, including
Мы
SaaS
таким
and
образом
PaaS.
избегаем серьезных вендор-локов, и именно поэтому можем позволить
We try to avoid vendor locks, and therefore we can afford working with any cloud provider.
Как бы из себя в дальнейшем влечет то, что внутри, снаружи, везде надо учиться менять
Whether you're
архитектуру
inside,
приложений,
whether you're
инфраструктуры
outside,
и идти cloud-native
you need to
подходу, когда
learn
приложение,
to become
архитектура
cloud native.
выглядит одинаково вне зависимости от
So the
того,
architecture
проектируется
of
одинаково, вне
your
зависимости от того, кто на
software,
нее
of your
хочет развиваться.
applications should be
Вот.
built in such a
Далее
way that it is
интересно, можно ли это
infrastructure
сделать
agnostic.
в дате.
You
Это
can
нам
deploy
расскажет
it
коллега. Я
anywhere.
передаю.
Whether it is possible in big data, that is what Oleg is going to talk about.
Рассказываем про инфраструктуру, но прежде чем я
Microphone, please.
собственно, хочется поговорить в принципе, а что же за данные, да? То есть наши
Microphone, please.
уже работают с данными. Они уже потребляют огромные объемы данных, они уже эти объемы переваривают и превращают в какие-то артефакты, с которыми дальше
They
работаем, чтобы улучшить
process huge amounts of data and
OSINT, внешние источники,
consume,
внешние
and
источники не очень
this data translates into some artifacts. We have public and non-public data sources which we use to improve our products and expertise.
Продукты, да, они стоят в контуре стендов, и за одну битву стендов приносит до 20 терабайт данных, с которыми мы уже потом работаем.
In one instance of standoff, we generate up to 20 terabytes of data, which we have to use in order to improve the software. So there is a lot of data. And our goal is to make sure that this data processing is as seamless as possible and to shorten the time between hypothesis and check of those hypotheses to make sure that we can get through as many hypotheses as possible to find out what really works. There are three questions about big data infrastructure: whether it is dedicated or shared, whether it is on-prem or cloud, and what is the tech stack, especially considering the certain restrictions that we have now to live with. So, whether it's dedicated or shared. Dedicated, not shared. So, traditionally, people would say, okay, let's buy some Hadoop clusters, let's buy something exotic and absolutely dedicated. There are some benefits and disadvantages, of course. The benefit is that this is my turf. I am king here. However, there is a disadvantage that you have to have a dedicated team for the Hadoop, for example. And these people do only this particular infrastructure. Certain SLAs, for example, have to calculate before 9 o'clock, and business then wakes up, and utilization goes down considerably. And when your big data team just says, we need more time, they can't have more time because the business has to use this equipment during the daytime, so they have to buy even more hardware. Especially if you, for example, need additional resources for birth scale-up in order to experiment with LLMs, for example. It's very difficult to do with hardware. Of course, the tech stack can be a restriction in the cloud too, but to a less extent. Now, when we use shared infrastructure, we can reuse resources in both ends. For example, when we need to do big calculations at nighttime, these calculations can use the cores from fintech. Okay, most of our customers are in Central Russia, and therefore, by 7 o'clock p.m., the usage is going down, and the resources can be quickly reallocated for the big data calculations. And if we have one stack, if we have a shared infrastructure, of course, it is much easier to play with this infrastructure in all directions. But whether it is a shared infrastructure or not, you have to dance with the trade-offs, whether it is on-prem or cloud. On-prem is secure, it is more predictable, it is less scalable, and your infrastructure should be hard. In the cloud, there are a lot of managed services on your fingertips. However, it would be painful to leave that cloud after all. On-demand resources and the flexibility of scaling. However, there are a lot of concerns about security and compliance. Some of those concerns are overblown, but of course it's more reliable, and of course you worry a little less about the safety of your data when it's really within your control. Can we get the best of both worlds? If you only use compute, Kubernetes, and storage, for example, on the cloud side, and you do all the superstructure on-prem, that, I think, is a way forward. And you have your core storage in your own data center, but if you need additional resources, you can, in a transparent way, move that to any public cloud. Now tech stack.
Очень часто,
A couple of
когда
words
есть
about
Big Data,
Hadoop.
там почти всегда есть Hadoop. А где есть Hadoop, там почти всегда есть Big Data. И все
Where
еще
there's
самые большие
Hadoop,
кластера в мире,
there's almost
много
always
в
big
России
data
работают на
and
Hadoop.
vice versa.
Но
And I
реальность
think
такова,
the
что
biggest
некоторые
clusters
legacy,
still work on Hadoop.
и
However,
Hadoop
Hadoop
стал
is
быть
already
популярным
kind of
примерно
legacy.
с
It ceased to
ростом
be
популярности
popular,
облаков.
I
Потому
think,
что Hadoop
when
в
clouds
жизнь
became
по-породному Cloud
popular,
Native не вписывался, не
because
связывался совсем.
Hadoop actually is
И
is
популярность Hadoop
as
росла.
not cloud native
Например,
as it can be. So
собственно,
Hadoop is
у
much less
расширенных облаков,
popular
особенно вот когда
today
мы про
than
облака
before.
говорим,
Especially
есть
when we
проблема
talk
с
about
масштабированием
clouds,
storage и компьютера.
Hadoop
Сколько данных
can
надо хранить,
really have a
все равно
problem
есть у вас
scaling
фронт, они
storage
должны
and
быть всегда
compute.
развернуты. Вы не
So
можете
if you have 100 nodes,
когда у вас нету
they
загрузки
should
продуктов.
always
Они всегда
be
будут запущены.
deployed.
Таким
They will
образом, вы
always
теряете
work whether
одну из
you
главных преимуществ
utilize Hadoop or
облаков,
not.
когда
And
свое
this is how
эластичное
you
потребление
lose
ресурсов.
the biggest advantage of the cloud,
Существует большая
elasticity
зависимость
of
от вендора
resource consumption.
или сложности поддержки собственной сборки. То есть Hadoop
Also,
это
there
очень
is
старая
vendor
экосистема из
lock.
2008 года.
Hadoop
Это
is
не
a
одна
very
коробочка,
old
либо
ecosystem
у вас
from
появляется команда,
2008, and
которая
it's
вам
not
укладывает
just
какой-то open source
one
компонент,
box. And
собирает,
if you
поддерживает,
either
и вы
support
ее
a
используете,
team
или вы
that
платите
puts
какому-то
together
вендору.
this
То есть
box
уходом
from open source
Cloudera и
pieces,
компании из
or
России
you
вариантов в
pay
России не
to
так
a
уж много
vendor.
осталось.
Cloudera has left
Cloudera,
Russia,
собственно,
so
я уже
there
говорил о
are
том,
very, very
что
few
Hadoop
options on the market.
местами ограничивает.
And of course,
Собственно, про то,
Hadoop,
каким путем мы пошли,
it has really big restrictions in this
в данных
department.
мы абсолютно так же,
This is what we
у
did.
нас видение про шаренную инфраструктуру,
We have
про
the same
технологический стек на
vision
базе
about shared
Kubernetes
infrastructure,
и S3,
technology stack on the
тотальная
basis of
автоматизация
Kubernetes
всего,
and
и
S3,
таким образом мы
total automation,
достигаем цели cloud-agnostic, то есть мы можем
which makes us really cloud agnostic.
в публичном облаке
We can deploy
развернуть
things
разделение
in
storage и
the
компьютера
private
как раз
cloud,
таки,
in the
чтобы
public cloud.
максимально
We can
использовать преимущества
distinct.
cloud-подхода
We can do a distinction between storage and computing. If you take an example with Hadoop, if you have a lot of commands working at the same time on Hadoop, they start fighting for specific hardware. Each command starts fighting for a specific piece of hardware, which of course can be done, but it's very inefficient from the utilization point of view. So we are cloud native by design with a lot of on-prem as well. Thank you very much for this intro, and let's start the discussion.
Давайте на самом деле я буквально несколько слов скажу на.
I'll say a couple of words on how this is all going to progress. Our idea about this discussion is that
этим занимаются, пообсуждать вообще проблематика там есть, нет, может мы ее сами
we have an open discussion of whether there is a problem or not. Maybe we've imagined this.
Оно может быть популярным,
Whether
там, шире, чем
Positive's solution today may apply to someone else. And if there are any ideas or questions, some challenges from the room, I think the people who are currently on stage will be up to the task.
Чем занимаетесь, чтобы аудитория понимала.
I would just like to ask everyone to introduce yourselves when you start talking.
Добрый день, коллеги. Да, меня зовут Алексей Pyatov.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alexey Pyatov. I work for VK, and I'm responsible for VK Cloud, machine learning, and data platform.
В принципе, тот тренд, который мы наблюдаем на рынке.
We have been witnessing the trend that you've been describing on a broader market. Choosing between cloud and on-prem, I think, is a little bit of a hyperbole. We are all techno geeks, right? And we all remember that you can't choose only one thing. If you choose the cloud, you need to ask why. If we buy a car, it doesn't mean that we never get a taxi, we never hail a taxi. If we hail a taxi, we don't sell the car. Of course, in the banking industry, in metallurgy, in manufacturing, there are certain data that can't be just put on the cloud. You need to, for example, tokenize data to kind of mince the data. You put that mince into the cloud, and you continue working with this without worrying that there will be data leak, because the data leak by default is impossible in this case. And we have seen a lot of companies that are mature enough already, and they are moving to this kind of infrastructure. So they want to keep some core data within their perimeter, the data that would be super secure, and they would be absolutely reliant on their full control over this amount of data. But if they want scalability, quickly, they need some cloud always at the ready. For example, business wants to deploy an MVP and scale it. We can't wait for 6 months because we will be losing out to competitors. Alexey Pyatov, a very big intellectual, has said that in every battlefield, there are always three sides. It's us, it's our adversary, and it's time. And actually, we are not fighting against our adversary. We and them are fighting against time. And if we can get resources faster in order to check our business hypothesis, in order to get MVP, it's actually like in Go, we can win the tempo, we can win time. And this is why it would be harmful to try to choose. It's beneficial to try to get the best of both worlds, to deploy something in the field, to migrate back into the core on-prem if needed. When we thought at VK about this, which stack to implement, we decided to move toward either maximizing the lifetime value of each customer or providing to the customers the tools that they themselves get from the open market. On the one hand, that's dangerous because we don't have vendor lock and customers can migrate, but we decided to risk it. We decided to use Postgres and other open source tools or Jupyter Hub, which a couple of data scientists can deploy, and you can actually do all the same things as with the vanilla format. And actually, the customers who come to us, we see that they appreciate that. They will not be locked to our infrastructure, because when they grow to a certain volume and they want to migrate back, they do migrate back, but they don't have to worry about this, so they come back all the time for more. So, a compromise approach, a holistic approach, is, I think, the right approach. Whether we like it or not, I think this is the only viable path forward. And I think it's the same about distinctions between compute and storage. Our data is only safe to the extent that our infrastructure is safe and our organization approach. For example, we can have a super secure computer and a password, but the password is written on a piece of paper and this piece of paper is stuck below the keyboard. So how safe are we? We're not safe. It's the same thing about our data in our compute clusters. If we make distinct engines between compute and storage, this is much more fail-safe. If our engine is compromised, it will not affect our data. And our data physically rests in 4 different data centers if we're talking about large cloud providers. So by design, they can't all be lost at the same time. So from the point of view of data processing, yes, I think you would be true. But I think it's not only about infrastructure and architecture. On this, I'd like to pass the floor to Anton Berishev, who is head of our architects, and I'd like to ask Anton talk about communication channels and on whether we know actually where our data is physically present at any given moment. Microphone, please.
Облако — это штука такая, которая воспринимается как нечто резиновое, нечто эфемерное и.
So when people think about the cloud, they think that cloud is
набору сервисов, который может быть представлен разными слоями, потому что облако.
Cloud is infinite. It's like a rubber cloud which you can stretch in all directions. A cloud is actually SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS. And businesses always can choose what they use. However, you always have to compromise between what you get and what you give. Some people want platform services, they want reliability. Others, they want as much flexibility as possible. This is why they introduce their own platforms, and they only use kind of virtual machines, the primitive things. Virtual machines are a good thing, but virtual machines just don't grow on trees. Virtual machines need communication channels, downstream infrastructure, it needs data storages and so on. And these infrastructure layers that people rarely think about because they're not on the surface, sometimes they become very important and they add a lot of volume to your idea. You can start with the consumer of cloud capacity. The consumer of cloud capacity actually minimizes your operational risks and costs. Because business, when they offload part of their workload into the cloud, businesses also want a distinct areas of responsibility and risk mitigation, because they need to understand what they rely on, what they rely on their partner for, and what remains in their unique zone of responsibility. So when you hybridize your infrastructure, you need to remember that, physical laws remain the same, and even if you quote-unquote go into the cloud, it will not be a silver bullet for all your problems. You have to manage it, you have to you have to build your infrastructure right. Of course it is flexible, of course it is adaptive, of course you don't have to predict how much capacity you would need in the future, but fail safety is always below Unity, and it works for the logical layer and for the applications. Of course, in the era of microservices, you have to think about so-called immutable services. When we can have a compute that goes and replicates itself all the time in Kubernetes. And this is how people become vendor-locked. Because the implementation of mechanisms in a specific cloud provider, this is not a Russian problem. AWS actually exposed the market to this problem when they started to offer their microservices. A lot of customers who started with Amazon, who did everything according to their best practices, they actually found themselves unable to move away from Amazon, especially after you have created this quote-unquote elastic infrastructure, which grows with your needs and so on, and it does save money. But if something goes wrong, you can't do the same thing with any other vendor. You will have to choose your approach to automation if you decide to move clouds.
Основа, о чем хочется сказать, это
the most important thing of course, is fail safety. All cloud providers try to be within themselves as fail-safe as possible. And when the user integrates their infrastructure with the cloud, you need to think about your communication channels, that they are reliable, that they are secure. This is a cybersec conference after all. You need to understand how well your information in the cloud is protected. Because somewhere you need to add on some other security. Somewhere you need your administrative resource. Of course, you will not need as much administrative resource as with on-prem, and the process itself will be shorter. So your time to market will be shorter, that's true. However, you still have to work with very, very good people who know how to cook your cloud. And this is another challenge for your business. If you start using this right, when your infrastructure subsequently grows and scales up, your life will be much, much easier. I'll give you a very simple example. So we are making a hybrid infrastructure, everything works okay. We have scaled part of our capacity in the cloud, users are happy, customers are happy. There is an excavator that, for example, digs up some optical cable and breaks some optical cable, and your data is still safe in the data center, but doesn't work anymore if there was just one cable. Of course, some alternative solutions are always available, but if you are already used to high speed, you're not going to deceive and you're not going to circumvent physics. So you have to think about fail safety from the early stages. Clouds have a lot of options. Clouds talk to mobile carriers and wireless carriers, so you have to use all the opportunities. So again, there is no such thing as a magic wand, which you kind of wave and everything clicks into place, and everything is fail-safe and everything is scalable infinitely and so on. Clouds are a great tool, but you have to personify it and you have to manage it. One other point I would add, even though a cloud is not a magic wand, well, it is in a way.
Сложный продукт, мы пытаемся предложить рынку какое-то комплексное, грандиозное IT-решение.
If we're trying to offer a complex and some grandiose IT solution to the market, it will require almost immediately much more resources than before. And this is exactly what we want from the cloud, because cloud is perceived as an infinite capacity. Okay, it is rubber. It is not a magic wand, but it is infinite. So, looking at clouds, do clouds think about giving their customers tools for easily building hybrid solutions? Well, of course we do. All providers, VK is no exception here, have to think about three things. Product. Of course, any cloud provider wants to offer some new products to the market. Manageability of this product. You can't just offer people web interface with some buttons. This is a paradigm that leads to nowhere. You need various APIs, orchestration, automation, and so on. And everything should be applicable, should be usable by any consumer. Any product that is deployed on the cloud as a PaaS service or as a SaaS service, automatically, after it's deployed in backend,
которые позволяют выстроить сценарий автоматизации управления.
Collects a collection of interfaces that automate the entire life cycle of that product.
Много про то, что нам нужно универсализировать подходы и
We actually thought about universalizing our approaches to the company infrastructure, to on-prem infrastructure and public cloud. All cloud providers think about this. Not everyone can do that. We were able to do that. And we not only have a public cloud, we have a private cloud. It has the same software as in the public cloud, but we deploy it on the customer's premises. So the calls are the same, the commands are the same. The telephony, for example, is the same on-prem and in the private cloud. And this is how we universalize. We can use the same approaches, we can reuse code for on-prem and for the cloud. But this is kind of a vendor lock in a way, because the product for the hybrid that you have talked about is something that was born of the public cloud. Can I add to this in some business language? For example, we are a positive. We don't want to only sell our products in Russia. We want to go abroad. The cloud providers are different there. So, will we find ourselves in a situation when we use your cloud in Russia in addition to our on-prem, but outside of Russia, I can connect you with Amazon and I will deploy some applications and data on Amazon. Are you going to mirror this? Are you going to calc this? Whatever. Of course, we are a little restricted with the geopolitical environment. Well, for example, Amazon works in China, Amazon works in Asia, so I don't think it's a problem. Okay, I'm just thinking a lot, right? If you look at how we started deploying our S3, we of course decided not to reinvent the wheel. We looked at the intermediate level that was the most interesting to the business. What the business was interested in was an API that the company offered, supporting all the core functions between data and storage at the level of entry point. Because if we were able to do that, we would solve our biggest problem, how to start using all our services if we know how S3 works. S3 is a proprietary solution, but for the user, we are not vendor locked. We support standard AWS calls, which all other market players seek to support. We may not be the leaders there because we are trying to navigate our own path. We don't use off-the-shelf solutions, but we are not offering anything proprietary. So RFC is a great thing in network technology, yes? And a lot of things are baked into the manifests approved by RFC. And when we talk about developing our product further, we try to change the functional layers managing our product as little as possible. VK Cloud, this is not kind of magic, many years ago was born as a fork from OpenStack. Since then, our teams introduced a lot of changes. We actually changed everything, SDN as well. But our in-house written SDN, which we actually wrote from scratch, supports all the calls of the original SDN. Because we wanted seamless integration, really seamless integration. So when the geopolitical situation, when the geopolitical tension is lifted, the tools will continue working because we are currently not diverting from industry standards to inject our technology into any solutions of our customer as seamlessly as possible. I have a question on big data. You mentioned private clouds and public clouds. Do you have references of customers with hybrid infrastructure and data processing? Well, there are some references. We can announce after VAS. There are some examples which we will need to sanitize. We have signed NDAs, so we can only talk privately about them. But I think this is a great response to the customer's challenge. So, hey guys, it's all beautiful, we're happy, it looks good, but our InfoSec will actually sit on our hands if we try to move into the public cloud.
Что мы и там используем одно и то же.
And this is why we decided to use the same technology on-prem and on the cloud. So, are there any results you can share? Well, I cannot name companies, and there is some confidential information, but we have a large customer which drove us from the product development standpoint. So they came with big ones, they came with their great and very rigid requirements on how big data should work. This was one of their key conditions. There were several MVPs done, we had to do a lot of R&D, and 2 years on, their productive cluster is moved. There are several terabytes of data working all the time for various teams. They have an connectivity infrastructure with several independent communication channels, and they use PaaS service, a PaaS service as a corporate core, but it was modified and it was fortified, I would say, and they actually implemented some obscure service layers, modifying this standard PaaS, and this has translated into 30 to 35% more performance. You can actually see that if you take two absolutely the same systems. The engine is the same, but one is the same corporate storage, but one is deployed as a platform, the other is deployed as a PaaS, and you can see the difference in performance. Okay, that's very interesting, but Andrei, tell us what the business side is, because we IT guys, we are very romantic, but we need to be pragmatic here. Okay, pragmatically, it looks like this. We want all users to be maximally satisfied with the service level. But of course, this boils down to the technology stack. And we want everything new to make its way to its users just in time. And of course, we need to balance that against the costs. Of course, everyone understands that we are not looking at one-off things. Considering the company's strategy, we need to calculate how much we're going to invest this for 2, 3, 4 years down the road. Positive wants to scale in Russia and beyond. So the big question is flexibility. Are we going to have the same flexibility capability as today. This is why we're hybridizing. This is why we have certain things on-prem, but we can get certain things to the cloud and then to a foreign cloud. And if you have total automation, you can manage what you load where. And that will drive down your costs, of course, even though you are managing several clouds at the same time. And of course, we want the costs to be as low as possible, and that will be manifested through the efficiency, right? Several years ago, we had a lot of teams at Positive. Everything is important, everyone is important, and all teams said, I want 3 servers, I want 15 servers, I want 10 servers, and I'm always short of servers. Of course, actually, we put it very roughly, we don't want our users to even know where their data sits physically. It should be so convenient, it should be so seamless that users actually understand that there is no difference, right? There are no bad scenarios, there are no bad deployments.
Что с большими данными? Я бы их хотел хранить, хотел бы, соответственно, быть уверен.
Of course, when users want to store their big data, they first don't want it to get lost, and secondly, they want to get access to the data in order to analyze it. So I want ML, for example, to be part of my product, and this is a big challenge, how to do that. We are currently creating an internal solution, which in the short term should enlighten our internal customers, saying that if you want to test something, if you want to test a hypothesis, you can do that. You can go and do that right away. The more people are involved in your tool, the better your product is going to be in the end. So it is a holistic issue. And I think the right answer lies somewhere between partnerships with external providers, our own on-prem solutions. So everyone needs to come together because everyone has their piece of the market. Some smaller companies, they don't all need all that complexity. They want to go into the cloud. They need to negotiate fair terms of service, and until a certain moment, they want to use their services. They don't want to think about their data. But when you have fast growth, if you have peak testing capacity, of course, you will have to think about it more. How transparent is this? I'm responsible for operational efficiency as well, so transparency about how much it costs, why, and who actually spends the money, that is a very interesting question. We have a lot of teams, and I need to have visibility about who spends what.
в таком каком-то там полуонлайн формате.
So I want this transparency to be at least semi-online available, not upon request. So these are my thoughts about this. Can I add something? I'd like to move from the other end. You have raised the issue of transparency, and when we say transparency, we speak about economic transparency. Everything costs money. And all large players try to provide real-time APIs to manage your operational costs.
То есть это, единственный верный путь, потому что в конечном счете он вам позволяет на своей стороне.
This is the only right way because, for example, if you have a fintech solution, a FinOps solution, this is the only way for you to build it under your own roof. You may have your own customized solution, an intranet portal for your people where teams can order some additional capacity. They may not know on which cloud that capacity lies physically. They know that they can use it, and it is absolutely transparent to finance people. Yes, that is so, but if you are working with a mono system in one region, that's one story. But if you have another 100 hardware service and you are present in several regions, and kind of historically it is a legacy thing, you work with several cloud providers, and in a certain region you just don't have that provider available which you're using in another region. And when you start looking about this transparency, well, it's kind of apparent transparency. You will spend half a year before budgeting to understand who spends what, and when you get the understanding of that picture will be obsolete already. So I think the level of complexity of each solution should be commensurable with the scale of this, with the volume of the solution. Well, it's absolutely undoubted. The most important thing, I think, is every product that you're going to use should have interfaces for providing the necessary data. And then what you do about it, it's your analytics. It's a good practice, by the way. We provide a competitive environment for several cloud providers. Because if there is only one cloud provider, they will start moving against your sensitive data. So if you do multi-cloud, and if you want transparency about how much you pay for what in which cloud, it's important to get a single service which will bill you on all projects and create a single dashboard. Well, multi-cloud is a good story, even it's not about money. But when you compare service level, you can share with all providers which problems they've got, how they overcome those problems. You move the cloud industry in the right direction. You actually understand who does what and who does how. Are there any questions from the floor? Yes, you can look into that tablet. Maybe there are questions online. Hello, I'm Dmitry Kulinich, and I have a question about your stack. So which stack are you using in your internal cloud? And how many physical nodes do you have at the moment?
На самом деле серверов много, то есть у нас 3 цода и их...
A lot of nodes. We have 3 data centers, and in each of those we have hundreds.
Или чем мы управляем, да, или все вместе.
What do you mean by our tech stack? Yeah.
Соответственно,
The response was off the microphone.
Системы облачные. У нас это OpenStack SEV.
We use OpenStack SEV as our cloud system. We have some classic virtualization legacy systems. And it's all managed through Tensible and Terraform, kind of plain vanilla tools. And automation and hybridization is done by a wrap which we write in-house, which is a wrap around Tensible and Terraform. I think I can get deeper into the stack. I have a question to Oleg. You said in your presentation that Hadoop is legacy, and you shouldn't do it. So what is your target stack, if not Hadoop?
Собственно, все, что касается хранения данных, это S3 compatible storage.
Of course, if you look at S3 compatible storage on top of Ceph,
весь компьют в Kubernetes.
That's storage.
Дальше уже
All
вопрос, какой
compute
компьютер.
is in
Универсального
Kubernetes,
движка не бывает.
but there is no such
Для
thing as a
кого-то,
universal
для
engine
каких-то
for
use cases это
Kubernetes.
Flink, для каких-то use cases это Spark, для
We
каких-то
use
use cases
Flink
это
or Spark or Trina for various use cases. What about Empower? No.
это же мертвый Hadoop.
Но сейчас после
Empower
рынка возникает
is
движение,
dead
которое
Hadoop.
говорят, давайте мы сделаем некий вам универсальный выбор. Вот вам Empower, хотите Empower, это быстрее, чем Trina. Вот вам
There are
оперативных
kind of
запросов. Вот
some
я понимаю,
solutions
что,
about
выбор нет,
Empower.
возникали
Empower is better than Trina. Trina is for
Тут
federative
скорее
calls, I
история про
think.
то, что
But you
мы
don't seem to
выбрали
like it very
как
much.
основную архитектуру это Data Lakehouse.
We decided that our architecture will be Data Lakehouse.
Storage внутри S3 и
And Data Lakehouse is about storage inside S3 and engines like Trina and Spark. So you have Trina, S3, and Spark, like the Trinity. Yes? Yes.
это
Okay.
тоже сейчас становится стандартом де-факто на рынке.
That, I think, is becoming de facto
Ванильный, к сожалению,
de facto industry standard.
тяжеловато.
And Trina,
какое-то коммерческое
it is very challenging as vanilla.
Решением Trina.
We are working on our own Trina solutions, but of course we don't want to hard fork Trina, but everyone does that. Yesterday, for example, there was a presentation on Tinkoff. They also took Trina, and everything that Trina doesn't have, they write plugins for Trina. Yes, you were talking about yesterday's meetup. And this Trina, which you chose and which you modify, is it only for internal purposes or are you going to sell it? Right now, we're using it only internally. There are some internal needs that we have. We can take as is everything that can be used as is. And if we can't use certain software as is, we go short of hard forks, but we can modify things pretty big. Okay, I can see someone raising their hand. Of course, we will not be trespassing on the Q&A time.
Да, большое спасибо за доклад. Маргарита, Positive Technologies.
Thank you for this talk.
Вы в докладе рассказали, что вы хотите некоторую гибкость, да? Есть on-premise.
My name is Margarita. So you said that there should be a hybrid for flexibility between on-prem and cloud.
Какие-то фреймворки, которые работают с данными, но
In the cloud, there are certain frameworks, but they might not work in an on-premise solution. And what do you do in this case? And in a cloud, you would need some clusterization, blockers, and so on. How do you scale up your on-prem if, for example, your workload grows? We scale up through Kubernetes and its primitives. Kubernetes, it has functions working with horizontal auto-scaling from node to node, and I think on OpenStack it operates in the same way. This is a basic primitive, and I don't think you need anything else. Technologies that are unavailable in cloud or on-prem, well, we just don't choose them. The basic prerequisite of our technology stack is it needs to be deployable anywhere. So you're not making any utilitarian solutions. Okay, thank you.
Хотя, наверное, стоит после вот поднятой руки потом добавить. Я видел, да?
Okay. There is someone raising their hand as well. I will make an addition afterwards. Hi, I'm Andrei Kadishko from Positive. Dmitry, I have a question. You have made a commitment that we're not trying to reinvent wheels. However, you at the same time say that you are making your own solution to work with Terraform and Sensible. Haven't you found anything suitable on the market? Because you have to pay for development, you have to teach your engineers how to use this customized tool and so on. Well, it's not exactly a custom tool.
реализует стандартные ванильные Terraform и Ansible.
Actually, Terraforms and Ansibles are standard and vanilla. And people who know how to work with them, they will work with our tool just as well. The tool actually brings it under a specific umbrella. So the basic logic is you have a product development team. They do some product. Some of the DevOps, for example,
окружение для этой разработки. Так вот, смысл
are responsible for deploying
один файл манифеста, который бы описывал необходимые
for deploying the new developments. So we need them to write one manifest file,
которые они бы написали,
which would materialize through the same Ansibles that they have written once. So we have done that once. It is a standard, and if any changes are needed, the same core team is responsible for those changes, which means that our automations will not crawl in all directions across the stack. Because we have 1,500 developers across 100 teams, and if they all deploy their services in their own way, then you would get a structure that would be pretty hard to support. Well, I understand why you do this, but maybe it's easier to give people ready-made scenarios with standard vanilla tools. And this is actually what we do. The Ansible and Terraform scenarios are ready, and you can roll it out of Git. You can just choose it right away. But the question is, with this approach, you're not going hybrid. If you want a specific Terraform or Ansible, you can't deploy them anywhere. But we, through this tool, make it possible to deploy it anywhere. You don't have to think which scenario you roll. You just create a config file, and this config file will allow the system to make the decision for itself. But again, I think it's not very complicated to think on which cloud you deploy this, but thanks anyway.
Под вопрос, наверное, зачем нам что-то делать свое, если есть open source?
Did I get it right that you had this sub-question, why do we need to write something on our own if there is open source? We work with open source a lot because we wrap it in our services, and the answer is open source is okay, it's great, but this is semi-fabricated food. You have to fry the semi-fabricated meatballs before you actually eat them. GitHub is actually a wheel that has already been invented by pretty smart people working for big tech and everything, but you have to at least pump the tire to make sure that it not just rolls, but it rolls comfortably. We in our company, and as far as I understand, what Positive is doing is the same thing. You automate deployment, you create the management layer, because everything you take off the shelf, it's something that is very naked, but you need to kind of dress it up, and then it will work beautifully for everyone. Just a small detail on top of that, in very plain language. Large businesses want everyone to have the resources that they need at the moment when they need it. And if this business offers its employees the opportunity to apply for resources to on-prem or to various cloud providers through a single window, it's really much more usable for everyone, because everyone has their own skills, and if everyone has this pop-up window, which actually opens the doors to all possible clouds, that's great. And of course, I'll add an advertisement. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock, we will talk about that. Well, there are some questions from the tablet.
Тут большинство вопросов к тебе, Олег.
Most of the questions are to
Как вы
Oleg.
доставляете данные в облако? Как все эти
How do you deliver
облако
data
на
to the
жестких
cloud?
дисках или грузовиках?
So do you use trucks or HDDs or whatever?
Mobile. Такая
Yes.
большая фура с контейнером, чтобы перевозить
Amazon
в облако.
had
Да, я
this
говорил, что
snowmobile,
наши
a
данные,
large truck
primary location данных — это наше
4 petabytes.
приватное облако внутри.
Our primary location is our private
Когда
cloud.
нужно обработать,
So when we
обработать кусок данных в облаке,
need
поедут
to
они все.
process some part of the data in the cloud, of course, not all the cloud will go into the cloud.
Отлично. Второй вопрос про инфраструктуру,
Okay.
но мне кажется, мы на него...
The second question is on infrastructure, but I think we have answered this.
Что вы используете для вычислений?
Third question, what do you use for calculations? Spark or something else?
Не
And,
будет русским местом ИО.
Will the I/O be a bottleneck with S3? On the one hand, the answer is yes. On the other, no. The network in 2024 is quick enough already. Previously, 25 gigabits would be something very, very expensive and exclusive. Right now, 100 gigabytes is a pretty mundane thing. And of course, there are a lot of hacks with caching, hot data, in which you cache a lot of calculations on the nodes. And it really distincts the new system from Hadoop. Hadoop cannot give you data locality.
Игроки стараются предложить ряд эксклюзивных сервисов.
Large players already provide
Ну, грубо говоря, когда
direct integration with S3 when they have two objectives: guaranteed SLA for access to S3 through a communication channel, and on the other hand, you want exclusive integration.
Можем ли мы так, то ответ да, можем. Это был
We can do that too.
внутренний проект, мы его исследовали.
It was an important internal project, but we have researched it, and it's already in production. Yandex is doing the same thing. So there is a need. Actually, we responded to a call from business. So if you have a 100 gigabit direct link to the S3 infrastructure, which is on the cloud, of course, I don't think input-output latency will be something big. What is cheaper? On-prem team for your own servers or a team that knows how to cook your AVS? Well, I think my question is on the modern market, there is no difference. I think the answer will be quite individual. If you have a couple of engineers and they can be tasked with supporting your infrastructure, of course, it is much cheaper for the company to reuse them.
В команду обслуживания занимает там 6 месяцев на найм и еще там
рекрутерам
нужно в итоге там во всему этому
really
естественно это как бы выгоднее.
Take 6 months to hire an engineer and it costs you 6 salaries in the process. Of course, it is much better to reuse your existing resources. I don't think there is a universal answer here.
Не только команда инженеров, это и обслуживание, да, железо и.
Of course, on-prem doesn't mean that you only need engineers. You need electricity, you need cooling, and so on and so forth.
Информации в сети, там задачи, которые кто-то как облачный провайдер.
Information security as well,
это было в апреле вместе.
as distinct from the solutions that cloud vendors do. We had a workshop recently. We had a matrix of importance criteria.
Что подходит вашей компании, облако или on-prem? И вот.
And we got a rating of what's best for your company, cloud and on-prem. There is no such thing as a standardized answer. It depends on the company behavior, including your internal costs of engineering teams. Just 2 weeks ago, a business owner told me, I make kind of chemicals. I don't want an IT company within my company.
Увидел, что опасно полагаться просто так на кого-то.
Other people say that I can't, in 2022, I saw that I just can't rely on external partners. So I want an IT company within my company. So it all depends on the risk appetite of the business owners.
Многогранно. Два основных пути — это, значит, управление жизненным циклом оборудования, потому что...
There are two ways actually to think about this. First of all, you need to think about life cycle management. You just can't buy good servers, connect them, switch them on, and forget. You will have to manage them all the time. And you will have to replace them after some time. So if you look at today's market, well, I think the supply chains have stabilized. And if you look at the same market 2 years ago, that's nothing in terms of life cycle. But when things started to happen in 2022,
приходила в негодность, его надо было менять. Они столкнулись с тем, что кто-то покупал домашние NAS по цене корпоративного сториджа, потому что нужно было
и
как-то управлять процессом.
Household NASs at the price of corporate storages because they had to replace their storage with something.